Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Welcome to the Print SoftCover. We have with us Jaideep Hardikar. He is a Nagpur-based journalist. He is a core member of the People's Archive of Rural India, PARI, and he is here to discuss his latest book, Ramrao. Jaideep is somebody who has been reporting on India's agrarian crisis, especially from the Vidarbhas region. And through Ramrao, he brings to our readers a searing biography of a farmer who almost became a statistic among the scores of farmers who have committed suicide until now, but live to tell the tale. Welcome, Jaideep. Can you please hold your book up for our readers to see? Yeah, that's Jaideep's latest book, Ramrao.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So to begin with, can you please tell us a little bit about your protagonist, Ramrao, and how did you decide to tell his tale, and why do you think it's the best? It's the best way to offer a window into the larger problem of farm distress.
Well, I think Ramrao is a typical farmer of probably this country. He represents all that a farmer has. He's a marginal landowner, with huge debts, typical family problems, health issues. Basically, someone who is grounded in agriculture. That's his prime. That's his only income, and that is the only thing that he knows. As a bread earning thing. Very hardworking farmer. I wanted to always sort of comprehensively write something about the region I've been reporting from 1996, because I think 96 was also the beginning of the unfolding of liberalization age. It's from where the country's new era starts. I started working in 96, and that was also the boom of IT. The IT age of this country began. Right. So somewhere in my heart, I've always wanted to kind of write something comprehensive, not a typical 1,000-word or a 2,000-word story. But I was also a bit skeptical about, why should I be writing about suicides? Because, it's an issue, but ultimately I felt that it is the life of a farmer that needs to be portrayed, or that story needs to be told. And I met Ramrao accidentally, as I write in the book as well. I didn't know when I met him. I didn't know whether that I'll end up doing a book. But when I met him in 2014, that was around the time India was going into elections, general elections. It was only 3 or 4 days that he had come. He was in hospital and he returned home 3-4 days. So my first meeting was very intense with him. It was a very prolonged meeting. And then I decided that, I need to follow Ramrao very often. And I kept visiting him again and again. And I think somewhere around 2016, I felt that, his is a story that portrays, it's one of the stories, of course. There are hundreds of stories that one can tell in terms of, agrarian crisis is a very, very complex process. Right. But Ramrao's story, I felt, explains the process, because I started meticulously keeping the records of our meetings, notes of our meetings. And I felt that if I have to tell a story, it has to be a story that looks at, even if it is a mundane story, I felt that it's a story worth telling. I was not sure whether it will be appealing, whether any publisher would want to do that sort of a thing. But I felt it's an important story I would want to tell. I didn't bother about a publisher I felt that it's a story at that time. I feel like doing this story. I feel like, following his life, his village, his everyday tribulations. So I kept visiting him. And I think around 2017, a sort of very hazy structure emerged. I was not sure of what exactly I'm going to write. So then the structure evolved, and once the structure evolved, I think I felt that I should focus on his life rather than telling hundreds of things in one story. I felt
Right.
I'll focus on his life and then connect it with the broader policy frameworks, broader processes that I've seen unfold in the region. So and I wanted to write it for a very general audience. I know there are academicians, there are intellectuals, there are farmers movements, there are journalists who have reported on the crisis for a very long time. But I felt there was still some questions in the minds of a very general audience. Today, middle class is also disconnected from the village life. That's the kind of India we have today. And people wonder, why do farmers commit suicide? Why do they protest? What is it that we could do, etc., etc. And I felt that through Ramrao's story, I might be possibly able to touch upon certain aspects that would bring this gigantic economic, social, cultural, and a political crisis closer to the readers. That's how it began. I just met him.
That actually also answers my what the next question that I was planning to ask you. You yourself, in the prologue of your book, you've said that this is a story, the story of agrarian crisis, is a story that has now turned stale. The same people are saying the same things, and it's the same audience that is listening. So would you care to add a little bit more about that and how you have approached the subject a little differently?
Well, I wrote that from a very it's kind of a satirical take. It's kind of it's not seriously that I've written. It's a satirical take that for the journalists, for the media, for intelligentsia, it's a stale story because you ought to tell something new. That's the media framework we operate in. It's not stale anymore. It's not stale for people who are actually living it every day. So the newness, I think there's nothing new. What I've tried to attempt is to take a kind of zoom in and stay with my protagonist for some time, and it's all full this thing to him that he opened up his doors, his life for me. It's not easy, and therefore, and many things I could not. I sort of consciously chose not to include in the book because there are certain things. There are the question of privacy, the question of there were many questions and many challenges for me while writing. So it was more than what to include. I had to kind of first choose what to exclude. And my other challenge in doing this book, because there's so much that is written about farm crisis, and yet I felt that we don't know the full scape of it. We don't know how the life on a daily basis is like. As journalists, we go, we interview people, and we come back. And there is so much happening behind us, so much happening, that we don't understand, we don't know. So I think I have tried to bring the living part of a farmer. So you see the journey of Ramrao is not towards death, but away from it. So that is what I think. That's where I felt that it also leaves a reader with some sort of an optimism. It happened. I didn't want to deliberately do it because it's non-fiction. I didn't know, but I thought that this time span, 2014 to 2021, is good enough time span to actually explain what goes on the farm, in the village, in his life. Yeah. So that's probably the new thing about it. I've tried to bring the person closer rather than the meta and the
data, statistics,
exactly,
the theories.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So basically, you've and I agree to your point that people who live in cities, the 10% affluent people in our society don't really know what's going on with the life of the 50% who are in the bottommost structure economically. And you say that 3 decades of liberalization, privatization, and globalization has only widened this chasm. Why has this happened? Is it because these changes have been detrimental to the peasantry, or have they not percolated enough to the peasantry, or is it a bit of both?
I think if you look at generally globally, the farmer economies have boomed, but if you see globally, service sector is fueling the economies. Now, for me, I'm not a student of economics. I'm a student of sociology, but what I'm seeing is that the productive classes, the productive classes and the productive masses are actually ironically ending up in distress, whereas the non-productive classes, the non-productive masses, whether in India or elsewhere, they seem to be doing pretty well. It's kind of an irony of an economy where someone who is a producer, who produces wealth, who produces certain things, ends up in kind of a distress situation. You see, Indian industries are not doing pretty well. The non-performing assets of the banks that have pumped into the productive economies, that they're not doing well. Whereas the service economy, people like you and I, who basically don't produce anything but deal in services,
right.
they seem to be doing pretty well. And I think that restructuring has happened in a very quick time. It has happened in less than 20 years. Historically, whenever certain restructuring takes place in your society, economically, politically, and then socially, these shocks tend to create in a society, they tend to create problems. And I think Indian peasantry, if you look at, say, landless laborer, he would be poor. But off late, of course, there are many landless people who are trying to rent lands and lease lands and do farming. They are ending up with a lot of debts. That's the tendencies seen all over the country. Same is the case with marginal and small farmers. A 4 and a 5 acre farmer, he can manage his farm pretty well, but bring in the economic aspect of it, and then you see that the whole thing kind of becomes riddled with problems. Ramrao beautifully manages his farm. As far as management of his farm, that's the amount of farm he will do, and he will also provide man days or provide work to at least 4 or 5 families round the year. But if you look at once he harvests certain things, then if you look at the further chain, he is the one who is ending up with losses. In the value chain, he is the one. Let's say cotton. Cotton is his prime crop, but he is the one who is losing out. Up the value chain, everyone else is making money. The garment manufacturer, the ginning and pressing industry, the spinning industry, the retail garment owner, everybody in that chain is making money. So I realized that Indian peasantry is by and large sort of primary producers. They don't draw from the profits and the value generated in the value chain as we go up. So that is why I felt that Ramrao typifies or sort of symbolizes the problems Indian peasantry are facing.
But why has that happened? Have policy interventions not kept pace with?
Well, many things. Of course, yes. The policy framework is one thing. We have not been able to understand what kind of intervention at the central government level and at the state government level. Look at the insurance, the risk mitigation strategy of India, states as well as center. We have tried at least 6 or 7 different programs in less than 25 years.
Right.
If you look at a crop insurance scheme, it has changed 7 or 8 times. We don't know what kind of policy mechanism to adopt when it comes to addressing the issue of rain-fed farming. And rain-fed farming, by the way, equates to Indian poverty. If you look at the poorest regions of the country, they fit pretty well with the regions that are predominantly rain-fed areas, where the choice of crops and there's hardly any option to go for a second or a third crop around the year. So these are the regions where you see distress migration post Diwali, people migrate. Right. And we have not even begun to address rain-fed structures. Inflation also affects rural peasantry, rural masses. If Ramrao is producer of cotton or grain or soybean, he is also a consumer of that. So he is unable to sort of strike a balance between surplus as well as domestic need. Everything is now like surplus, whereas surplus is pretty small. I mean, he needs a lot of food. So, he sells cotton and buys man-made polyester fabric for himself. So that's the dichotomy. And that should have been sort of a concern for Indian policymaker. In the last 20 years, I have not heard a meaningful debate on anything around agriculture. Right from 2004, 2005, when the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, had acknowledged, and he acknowledged it in my hometown of Nagpur, that yes, Indian peasantry, Indian agriculture is in a deep crisis. That was 2005, 2006. But barring a couple of mechanisms, loan waiver is one thing. And you see those political demands, loan waiver or direct benefit, etc. But that doesn't fix the basic issue. Where is the income? Where is the income? A vast population of India engaged in agriculture, which is the productive economy, is not making enough income, enough returns round the year. And to me, I think that's the crux. We have not been able to address. There are regions where people are trying out things, local people, communities are doing or trying out things collectively, managing water resources, doing this and that. But in the end, barring the big farmers who also have other forms of income. Right. So even that could be a strategy. Maybe if we are not able to fix agriculture alone, then we have to look at agriculture plus. Is there something that we can add? His income needs to go up, and that's not going up. Relative incomes are going down. Though we say that we will double the income, that has been the flagship, announcements we've been hearing for almost 7 years now, doubling the income. But what? I mean, we don't know the base income. We need to have some sort of base income to which this marginal farmer needs to come, so that he's able to meet the basic aspirations of his family: education, health, a good house, better, amenities, some sort of, good food to eat, just like all the aspirations that you and I have, they also have. So
absolutely. And you mentioned interventions like the farm loan waiver, and there have been subsequent such schemes by subsequent governments at the center and at the state. What have they really done to the peasantry?
To some extent, the 2008 farm loan waiver helped, because what was happening is that for the previous 15 years, the formal loan structures had come to a standstill, meaning farmers were borrowing more and more from the informal sources. In 2008, when the central government announced a loan waiver scheme for the peasantry, there was that bottleneck was it was eased, that people began to go back to the banks for formal loans. But as I said, that that particular intervention or that particular policy mechanism and the subsequent loan waivers announced by the state governments in Punjab, in Uttar Pradesh, in Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, elsewhere, everywhere, then the central government did not give a loan waiver guarantee, counter guarantee. It was announced by the state governments, and states bore the bulk of the burden of the waivers. Those were not, those interventions were not matched by the other policies, structural changes that were needed to address the income, issues, to address the primary issue that, what do we do with rain-fed farming? What do we create in the local economies that would sustain a farmer after his first crop is taken? And I think Indian intelligentsia, academia, political leaderships, they need to it's high time we begin to address this question. It's more than 50% of India is not earning. If you look at the Oxfam inequality, state of the income and inequality reports, bottom 50% are not walking away with even 1% in the wealth created every year. Now, how can we sustain with this sort of an imbalance? I don't think it is tenable. It is not. It's not sustainable. In the long run for any society.
And also a corollary to that, much has been said about the farm laws, which are the 3 farm laws that were passed last year by the central government. And there are proponents of it who basically say that these are much needed reforms, though with certain loopholes, because they give farmers access to markets. They ensure that the farmers can sell directly to the consumer, to companies who can probably give farmers more money. The flip side to that is, of course, that the farmers, these are large conglomerates, and they can get the better of farmers. And there is also this whole question about the existing supply chain and the APMC markets and so on and so forth. In your reporting, through the story of Ramrao, of course, and generally, you've been reporting on this for so long. What is the general sense among farmers about this?
Well, it is, different regions will have different takes on the farm laws. But let us look at the structure of Indian agriculture. Let us go back 30, 40 years ago, 4-5 decades ago, to look at what propelled the Green Revolution in India, and what is the structure of agriculture and agri markets in the other countries. Forget for a moment, corporate or non-corporate, government or non-government. I produce something, it has demand, and I need a remunerative, I need price that covers my production cost, plus I need some money on which I can subsist and survive. This is, you produce anything, you will charge me a sum. If I am your buyer, you will sell that produce to me at your production cost plus other costs covered, right. And then you will also keep a margin for that.
Right.
Well, the Green Revolution was modeled on basically 3 important things. One was quality inputs, and when I say quality inputs, it also means the entire production system, meaning right from seeds up to credit to availability of water to fertilizers, everything.
Okay.
Then I need, whatever I produce, I need to create a system where I have an assured market for that. Meaning whatever I produce will be bought. Now, the government of India then said we will procure everything. It was a state-run procurement. And whatever you grow, particularly food grain, because we were trying to address the issue of food deficit at that point of time. And third was, whatever you produce and whatever I buy, I'll make sure that you get a minimum price, kind of a remunerative price, which is called minimum. It's not the maximum support price. Right. It is called as the minimum support price for the very, very reason, because it's the state which is, if you get more than that in the private open market, please go out. And that's the legal structure. So the government said, okay, these are the 3 things we will provide you, and different state universities in the different, ultimately it's a state subject primarily. So state universities played a role. But in the last 40, 50 years, what has happened is we have evolved, our markets have evolved, private markets have come up, all that is okay. But the first system of inputs, as well as the entire input structure has crumbled. It has been crumbling because our extension systems, whether of the state agriculture departments or the agriculture universities, don't exist anymore. So suppose I want to, like Ramrao last year started planting haldi, turmeric. He was a cotton grower, a soybean grower, and suddenly he felt he will grow turmeric. Who told him to grow turmeric? He was groping in dark. He was moving here and there, and somewhere he found that will be good for turmeric. But there was no training, right? From cotton is a different cropping system.
Right.
Yeah. To turmeric, which is a different ball game altogether, there was nobody for him to kind of bank upon. He has nobody to turn to. There's no, and it's the same, if you ask a Punjab, maybe Punjab has a better agriculture extension system, though it is crumbling there as well. But if you ask a farmer to, don't grow this and that, grow capsicum tomorrow, I need to have some sort of training about the markets, about its production systems. I keep hearing this from a lot of well-meaning political leaders who go here and there and say, please don't grow. Even the major agriculture experts, they keep writing in different newspapers that we should stop producing grain. We should go for high-end crops. People are dying because of that. In Marathwada, I saw the poly houses and the shed nets have come up, and all of them are in doldrums today. Hugely, their lands are mortgaged, houses are mortgaged. So the thing is, if we are asking them to take risks, we need to have structures that will minimize it. It's a risky thing. We have climate change on one hand, and we have very volatile international global markets on the other hand. Every year, the different crop sends different signals. Yes, if last year it was cotton, which was down. This year, it's the soybean, which will be down. We don't know. How will we educate peasantry? So farm laws tackle only one part of, or they are trying to address one part of it, and which is not true, which is also sort of half true, that we want to make the markets available. Markets are available. People from remote parts of Maharashtra, from Gadchiroli, if they get prices, they will collect aggregate material and go to Vashi market in Mumbai to sell this thing. But a small farmer with 2-3 acre land holding will not be able to
have that kind of access. Right.
That kind of access. He can't travel more than 10 kilometers because then either he will do his farming or he will. So all this is a humbug. I think what the government has done or is doing is to bulldoze and raise, and I've written about it too, that you are actually dismantling an architecture which needs repair and probably which need an overhaul. But you are trying to bulldoze it without actually telling me what is the alternative structure that you are giving me. You're not giving me an alternative structure. You are saying, "Aapka ghar purana ho chuka hai, I want to bulldoze it." It's okay, but where do I go? So you are leaving me on the streets. That sort of hypocrisy, I think, is not. It's unfair and it is very unjust.
Okay. And you also started, your argument by saying that different states, farmers from different states have a different take on it. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because in the farm protests as well, we've largely seen farmers from Punjab, Haryana participate.
Yeah, that's because the last remaining architecture of inputs plus remunerative prices plus assured procurement exists in the northern parts of the country. Those who have studied green revolution of the country, they will be able to explain that the green revolution actually began in the Kaveri Delta for a very small while, but when the government realized that the surplus paddy or grain doesn't come into the central pool, it is consumed locally, that's when they began to look at the areas where the government would get the surplus grain, which was to be distributed among the Indian populations to the fair price shops. That's when Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, Indo-Gangetic Plains, some regions. That's where when these states and these regions began to grow other than what they were growing. And the wheat, paddy, all these crops were new for Punjab or for Haryana. They were growing different crops before the Green Revolution began. But so they were not consuming what was grown. They were growing it for the central pool, and that's how the architecture got ensconced. Created, and it brought some sort of stability to the farmer there. Now, if you want to destabilize it and put everything in the sort of an open market, the states which have created all this won't be able to, because what will happen is that tomorrow, if I am in loss, I am going to my state for support. The markets don't enter into support. So in the entire agrarian crisis, it's another irony that we have become a very privatized, open and a liberalized economy. But whenever there is trouble, who do we go to for succor? For climate change aberrations, we go to our own state governments, or we go to the central government. I need support. Where are the market? Now you've created market mechanism for, say, insurance. Maharashtra this year, or around the country this year, the number of farmers going for crop insurance scheme has declined. In fact, as compared to last year, there's a sharp decline. In Maharashtra, there is clamor because insurance companies are here to make money. They are profit-oriented companies. They are not here to do welfare. Welfare is to be done by the government. No one else will do it. That's the prime role of the state. So the risk mitigation strategies the government wants to wriggle out of the whole thing. I think it's become too much of a headache. They want to wriggle out and let the private parties handle, but I think it's a very dangerous game, and it's totally unthought. I mean, you can't. The people will come to you for succor. Right. You need to have a system. You need to have a mechanism to support the farmers. Create certain funds around the year. You need some sort of money. You need a better budgetary planning for that. Instead of that, what you want to do is to wriggle out of it and let the private parties handle it. They won't do it. And so that's the another dichotomy. If someone has committed suicide, the families need support. They will seek support not from the market.
They'll seek support from the government. Right.
Seek support from the government. So that's the dichotomy. I think we're creating laws that we don't know how to deal with the consequences later.
Vidarbha has become synonymous with farmer suicides over the years, over the last 2 decades. How is agrarian crisis in Vidarbha different from the rest of the country?
See, Vidarbha's, the whole of Vidarbha, if to go about 100, 120, 130 years ago, this was a region that actually provided for the cotton boom or the cotton industry. Apart from Mumbai and Ahmedabad, the Central India's cotton to cloth chain started from Vidarbha. And until the 1960s and 1970s, Vidarbha was a prosperous region. Even before it got annexed to Maharashtra. In the 7 central provinces, this was a very prosperous region. In World War I and World War II are mills here run by that's another project I am working on over the next 2-3 years. We actually exported cotton and cloth, and this region made money. I think the problem begins in the 70s and then the late 80s when the monocropping takes place, and the shift of the economy towards services begin to start. And in late 1990s, when the state begins to withdraw its support system, and the cotton becomes the freest commodity, you can import and you can and our in the 70s and mid 80s to mid 90s, this region also lost the handloom, the traditional handloom, which were the users of cotton, and the integrated textile mills, which were right from Gondia down up to Buldana. There were series of textile mills who were the consumers of cotton, and they created a value chain. When they were shut down, the monocropping had set in by then, because cotton was a cash crop. food grain, millets, pulses. The prices were not growing. So there was a shift, huge shift towards monocropping of cotton.
Okay.
And Vidarbha doesn't have, Vidarbha is an assured rainfall region, but we don't have surface water systems to support farmers for the second and third crop. It has begun now. So that's another thing. So the option to diversify, option to take the second and the third crop is really, cotton is a dryland crop.
Right.
You know, you plant it and you get it for like, the harvest continues for 6 months. But now your economy needs, you need money every day.
Right.
And you make income once in a year. So once in a year income to sustain 365 days in an economy which is globally linked, where education, health, all the costs are going up, fuel prices have gone up. How do you sustain unless you have a diversification, round the year income from agriculture, for which you need water resources, you need other structures to support you, you need evolved market mechanisms to support, and you also need, other than agriculture, you need other systems of income, whether it is services or whether it is industry. I think it's not merely agriculture that has suffered in this region.
It's everything else that has compounded.
It's the region's inability to actually create others. So I feel that agrarian crisis is per se is also the crisis of other sectors.
Right.
No industry coming, the mining going down, the forest economy is stagnant. Everything has stagnated, but for the services economy. So those who move to the cities for work, even if menial work, I feel they're okay, because they're at least not dying. They're getting something by selling tea, by selling bhujiyas, by selling pakodas, or by selling. They're okay. Their life standards have come down. It's better to be in the village, but at least you're not indebted. Yeah, I'm not saying that they're okay. I'm saying that they're marginally better than they were. Say they're trying to escape indebtedness and problems back home. They have new sets of problems, but they have at least round the year some activity to kind of join. Meaning, if you don't, you can do this, which now is, of course, in trouble in the post-COVID and post-note ban. The small industry sector is collapsing. So they are also now in trouble. That was something that got created in the last 2 decades, but I see that also is in trouble now.
Moving to our last question now. One of the ways or one of the approaches that certain NGOs say should be emphasized more on is the whole psychological or mental stability of the farmer, and they say that is one of an important element in being able to curb farm suicides. Now, the government had also taken up a couple of such programs, which ultimately were folded up and they're not in existence anymore. But through Ramrao story as well, how important do you think is mental strength and being able to psychologically have your center an important element in curbing farm suicides? And also, you can tell us a little bit about what happens in Ramrao's case without revealing too much to our readers.
Well, psychiatric or psychological approach is it is an important approach, but as I write that, if your other structures, if your economy is not supporting you, it's like opening the tap, keeping the tap open, and then you're trying to mop your floor dry with your tap open. I've mentioned it in my book of how these different measures came to be, tried they were tried. Governments tried that, but a lot of psychiatrists who have worked in Vidarbha with farmers, they will vouch for it. They will tell you that we are dealing with one small part of it. Once the person is into that, you can avoid suicides. You can, through medication, through counseling, you can avoid suicide. But the scale, and the gravity of it, like there were more than 2 million, people who were found to be in trouble in one of the surveys. How do you deal with that sort of thing? So you got to fix the basic issues. You got to make sure that people don't end up in that mental state.
In the position.
They don't go crazy. That's why Ramrao's story for me was important, as a writer and a journalist, that his journey starts when he wants to end himself, and then as he moves ahead, everything else remains the same. His economic side, his cultural issues, his social, nothing has changed in his life. Only thing is that even in that despair and in that hopeless situation, he has given himself that mental solace that I need to hang in. So I'm saying that if you even if the number is huge, 400,000 farmers have killed themselves in this country. That number is staggering. But also look at the number of farmers who are not dying. That doesn't mean and I quote one of my mentors and one of the towering leaders in Vidarbhas farmers, Mr. Vijay Javandia. He keeps saying, he reiterates every time that those who are not dying are no way better than those who unfortunately took their own lives. Ramrao's life is not any good than it was, say, in 2014. His troubles, his worries, every year new things come up. Sometimes it is a pest, other times it's a notebandi, policy framework, global markets. He has to deal with so many things, plus his own personal issues. And he's all there by himself. He's all alone. And even in this case, I am saying that Indian farmers are mentally strong. They're not killing themselves in droves. It's scattered. Some people here, some people there, or they will quit. They will do anything to hang in, to stay there afloat. Like even in COVID, or they will walk miles to go home. I think Indian middle classes will not be able to sustain this sort of economic drudgery if we were to put through a crisis. I have been through an economic in the same period, and I mentioned it. It was a bad 1 year. I was like people have lost their jobs. I can see they need psychological counseling. They don't know how to deal with it. With people like Ramrao gives me a lot of hope. Therefore, many times when I am in a sense of despair, I go and meet a lot of farmers. They give me a lot of hope that despite the kind of drudgery, the kind of pain they have been through last 25, 30 years, there is still an option to fight back. And I think what's happening in Delhi around the Singhu border, many, well-meaning good people don't like it because it's against, against the government, but it's a fight back. It is saying that we cannot take it anymore. So fighting back, protesting peacefully, that creates hope among people like Ramrao, who may not join the protests there, but they know that there are people from their fraternity who are taking it up. They keep an eye, even if they can't go because of the resources or lack of it. They keep an eye on the newspapers, on the news, and on from the pamphlets that come trickling down. They keep an eye and they feel, something is happening. There's a fight back. So I think that this story that I wrote was, in a sense, it's from the hopeless situation from where he starts, and ends up on an optimistic note where he says, no, death is not an option. I got to fight back. I got to hang in.
Thank you so much, and we'll end on that note. Look forward.
Thank you, Manasi, to you and the print team, SoftCover, for having. This is the first program, or this is the sort of formal launch of the book in the difficult times. I hope you all stay safe. I'm eternally grateful to the print.
Wish you and your family the same, and thank you so much for joining us. And to our readers, thank you to our viewers and readers. Thank you so much for watching the SoftCover today.
Thank you.